We are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Vagabond Dog Industry Chats. This week's guest is, first off, very happy to be back after the hiatus. First show of 2022. And actually, I think this is technically episode 69, but we can say hi to Douglas Bogart from Limited Run Games. For those who are unfamiliar, Limited Run is a physical games producer, manufacturer. You guys make special edition, collector's edition, physical editions, including one for us recently for the PlayStation 4. And that's what you guys do. Can you get? I mean, you do a lot more things. You also have a lot of like collectibles and merch and stuff like that you produce for a wide number of developers. So, I mean, does that sum it up, or is there more that I'm missing?
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. I'm Douglas from Limited Run Games, as he just introduced, and yeah, we do physical versions of video games. We also do like vinyl. We do collector's edition projects for certain people. We're opening a video game retail store soon in April in North Carolina. And then we do a lot of stuff. We have trading cards. We're doing books now. We have a lot of good writers on staff like Jeremy Parrish and Jared Petty. And then yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. It's hard to remember everything we do. Sometimes I don't even know what's happening.
Right.
Because the company's grown so much from being just two people.
Right. So, I mean, I guess that's one thing that always kind of fascinates me about the structure of the way you've got things set up. You've constantly got new developers, getting physical editions done. You've constantly got new collector's editions. You've constantly got new drops. You're working with a ton of different people all of the time. All of these different, IPs and different needs and demands and requirements. How do you keep things straight, and orderly for yourself and keeping your so many different projects running simultaneously? What's the secret to good multitasking?
Good hires. So making sure that you don't overburden yourself with too many tasks. When the company started, it was just Josh and I for like the first, half or like, it's 6-9 months. It was basically just us, and I handled shipping, I handled customer service, I handled some of the marketing. I had to go to conventions to sign new games. It was a lot of work initially, and then Josh, he did a lot of the getting the website loaded. He ordered games from Sony. He also had to learn how to do that whole process, which took a while. Then he was responsible for signing games as well. And then over time, the more projects we got and the bigger our runs got, it was clear that there was just no way I was going to be able to survive doing everything. And one of the biggest things, and this is probably good advice for people in general, is uh, if you're one of those people that really likes to be hands-on and kind of do everything yourself, like you have to admit to yourself, like what things are you willing to give up that will make your life better? Like when we were like, hey, let's hire an actual shipping team, I was stubborn and fought it at first, and I had to like ask myself, like, why am I fighting for this? Like I absolutely hate shipping. Like
Right.
is this an ego thing? Like I had to tell myself, like, no, I'm good. Like no one's saying that I can't handle it. They're just saying, hey, we can afford a shipping team now. Like you don't have to do it. And I would say for anyone in a business, if you can afford it, find someone that can help you, maximize your job. You don't have to overburden yourself and do everything forever.
Right. I have definitely personally fallen into that trap like a lot. Um yeah, I'm a bit of a control freak when it comes to managing our stuff. I've done my own merch. We ship it out from here. Like I've taken on a lot of that responsibility, and I don't know. I think there's like a difficulty in trusting. Like when you do something yourself for long enough and you know the process and everything, it's about developing that trust in other people to see some things through. And I'm curious how you were able to like get to that level, because you can't grow a company the size you have without building strong trust within people. And so I'm curious how that process was for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a weird thing because Josh and I are very much hands-on people, and even with each other, it was hard to just like trust each other. Like, hey, I know you can handle this on your own. We just always kind of assumed the other would want feedback or want some help, and then we both had to agree at one point that it was better to slowly let things go and let other people handle it. So like I said, we started off as 2 people in 2015, and as of 2022, we're like close to 60 people now.
Jeebus.
That number sounds way inflated though, because a lot of that is shipping and support.
Right.
But there's still multiple producers on staff that make sure all these projects that we're doing stay on track. Josh and I, like, the process basically starts off with us like looking at games or having people contact us. We go through the business deals, then those move on to a producer, and then that moves into once it's produced to shipping and then post support. So it goes down like a ladder, and you
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to be able to, I guess, trust people to hold the ladder with you. If I had to make a weird analogy, that's it, it's hard. Like, even when we did a marketing team, like I was doing that, and then I was forcing myself to be a part of all their meetings for a while, and eventually I had to be like, nothing's changing. Like, they're doing a good job. Like, nothing's going wrong. I'm not saying anything anymore in half these meetings. I have to kind of just let go. And like you're saying, like, it's hard. I grew up playing in punk bands, and we were very do it yourself and
Mm-hmm.
like screw corporations and the man kind of crap.
Now look at you.
So that
So
mentality was very, very hard to break.
yeah,
And yeah, so, but it eventually you do it and you start trusting people, and there will be mistakes, and you just have to like also tell yourself like people need to be held responsible. And obviously mistakes can happen. People are human, but then you have to evaluate like how often are you able to do that, like allow
right.
those mistakes. And that's the biggest thing we're doing as a company, is just trying to like anytime that kind of stuff happens, we try to correct as soon as we can.
The so now that I mean we you touched on it a little bit, but I do kind of want to dive into the process of you see a cool game or a cool or meet an opportunity to produce a physical edition to game shows up in somebody's hands. Now I know that's a lot. We could probably blow 3 hours talking about it, but if we can walk step by step through some of the biggest milestones of there. I mean, I know them having gone through the process now, but I want to hear it from your side, or like, what do you think the most critical steps along the way are?
Oh, I mean, the way that the process originally worked was we did Breaching Clear, which was our own game on Vita. And it was self-published, and at the time you didn't have to have ESRB ratings on Sony products because Sony didn't require it. So that made it a little, on one hand, good because I didn't have to pay the ESRB for a rating that no one cared about. And then on the other hand, it made it bad because it kind of looked bootleg. So
Right.
the process to getting a lot of these games, which is obviously critical to the whole company, was hard to do at first because I was sent to PlayStation Experience in San Francisco when it was there. And I would walk around with Breach and Clear, and I would go up to devs like Rami of Nuclear Throne fame, and I'd say, "Look, we made this game. We could do the same thing for you." And a lot of devs there were like, "You made this in your garage. This is fake. Uh, limited run's not a real thing. You're like, I don't understand what you're trying to do. Like, why would I not want to be digital? Why are you on Vita? Vita's a dead platform." That was a lot of the. So it was really hard at first, but then we had a couple of people really believe in us from the get go, like Oddworld, and then our neighbors Epic believed in us to do Shadow Complex. I think those kind of things were critical because they firmly established legitimacy for us to other people. And I would say nowadays, when we work with developers, it's kind of like it used to be 50-50. I'd actually say it's like less than that now, where more often than not, developers are reaching out to us versus
Mm-hmm.
me reaching out to them. And we just kind of have to approach each game differently, and we have like the team look at it. A lot of times it just starts with me. The only time it usually goes to the team is if it's like a genre I'm just not very good at, or it's genre I'm not maybe I'm not a fan of. Like if you had a sports game and you came to me, I
Right.
would immediately skip it and give it to someone else to look at. But basically from that step, that's where we kind of figure out what we're going to do. And we try to figure out what games sell the best. Like a lot of retro style games do really well because our audience is people that collect, and that is a nostalgic thing at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I probably trailed off really far what the original question was, but
So that's the nature of the show.
yeah.
um,
Um,
if you want to talk a little bit about that collector's audience, like it is a set demographic, right? Like it's not a lot of 12-year-olds these days aren't getting like jazzed up to own, their hype collection is Fortnite skins or whatever.
we do have a lot of young adults though, which is nice.
Like yeah, explain what do you where is the demographic for collectibles and
Yeah, the demographic when we first started the company definitely was more skewed to late 20s and up, kind of, 20s to 40s. Because these are all the people that grew up with physical media and understand the importance of it. And then as we've grown and done bigger IPs such as like Castlevania and Star Wars, we're now approaching the younger audience, and the younger audience has now reached a legal age where they finally have a job, they have their own disposable income, and they're watching their favorite YouTubers and like collectors, and they're seeing things that like maybe their dad played, and they're like, now I want to play this, and that they end up in our hands after that because they're like, oh, they're re-releasing a game my dad might have played, or my favorite YouTuber loves this game and I don't know about it because it came out when I was a literal kid and I have money. Now I'm gonna buy it, and it's our audience has definitely shifted now, and it's like it's pretty wide, and we have a much larger equal. It's not quite equal, but it's a lot closer than it was in terms of gender, which is nice. It's not just a bunch of old guys buying in our
Right.
games, which thanks old guys, I appreciate that, but we're it's much broader now, and it's really cool.
Right, more sustainable also if you have a nice
Yep.
mix. Um, so I mean, I've fallen in and out of love with collecting things. I've we talked a little bit before the show, but I went through a period where I was like, oh, I'm getting rid of all my stuff, and then years later, I was like, damn, I miss all my stuff, and I started getting bringing it back into my life. Um, I mean, I guess looking at the room behind you, I don't need to ask, but where do you sit in the collector sphere mentality, and what do you think really truly drives the like mentality of collection?
So I've gone through similar processes myself. I was always a collector as a kid. I like never threw anything away. I dreaded the idea of selling my stuff. Then I got an apartment with a girlfriend at the time that we shouldn't have got because we were too young and didn't know what we were doing. And then the renters were terrible people that we were renting from, like the apartment complex, and they illegally evicted me and threw out. They like, well, I say threw out, but I know that they stole the majority of my stuff. And that was probably when I was like, I don't know, 20, maybe 21. And I was like, you know what? Collecting was bad. I need to be a minimalist. Clearly, like, this hurts more than it ever could have. Like, if I had gone even harder, I like it would hurt even more. Like, they almost stole like $1,000 cello I had because I'm a
Damn.
cello player. And I was like, they somehow found that, but couldn't find all the other stuff. So at that point, I stopped being a collector. And then, uh, probably like my early to mid 20s, that only lasted a couple years, and I was like, you know what, I should collect again. I started doing that again. We get an apartment that's near a creek, and I asked the people, hey, does this creek ever overflow? And they go, oh, that used to happen a long time ago, but it doesn't happen. 2 weeks later, that creek
No.
overflowed and destroyed my entire first floor, and I hadn't finished moving because I just got there. So games were like alphabetized on the floor, and like consoles, and it just destroyed everything. The craziest thing is the only console to survive was the Dreamcast. It like I assumed it died, so I didn't touch it for a year, and then I went to turn it on, and it sounds like an airplane, but it works. It literally my PS2, my Wii, all my like retro consoles, everything died but that Dreamcast, which is my favorite console. So I was like, wow, I can't believe you did that.
What is it about the Dreamcast that like
It's just I want to say it's well made, but the reality of that is technically not that well made. It has all sorts of issues that you can find, but I don't know. I guess it was just sturdier. It's tough. Like it has its own share of like electrical issues that can happen to it on over time, but like it as a console is just it's a beefy thing. But yeah, then I stopped collecting again. And then we get closer to when Limited Run was about to start. I'm at a company called Mighty Rabbit Studios, which Josh owned. We're doing game dev stuff. I'm surrounded by his game collection all day, every day, and I start thinking to myself, man, I really want games again. And then Josh was like, hey, I know you lost a lot. I'll help you get some of the stuff that you lost. Like, I'll find deals for you and help you out. And then that kind of built into, this is a very small fraction of what goes on in my house. But now I collect all the time. And I think for me, it's the nostalgia. There's a lot of memories attached to a lot of games for me. Like, almost every Final Fantasy that I've ever played, I can attach to like a significant moment in my life. And like Dreamcast, Dreamcast is like when I met Josh, my co-founder. Like we were in middle school, and we bonded over like Gundam Wing and Dreamcast. So like that has a place in my heart for that. And then like there's games I've played with my wife that have special attachments to me and like series and stuff. So I just it's kind of like I just think there's a special connection of like love that I have for these things. They're not just things to me. That being said, I have recently come to the conclusion if my house were to randomly explode in some freak accident, at least it was just stuff. I'm
Right.
not going to be happy about it, but I won't be as heartbroken at this point in my life because it's already happened twice before. That being said, I don't want that to ever happen. But this stuff does mean a lot to me, and I think
Right.
that's where a lot of collectors come from. They remember like certain memories. Like maybe they had a mom they played a game with that no longer lives, and they're like, "This game means everything to me."
Hmm.
I mean, it was like that with Josh when his mom was, he's told this before, so I don't feel like I'm spilling it, but our moms died close together, like in terms of time. His mom died around the time Shadow Complex came out, so he played that to kind of grieve, and that game meant a lot to him. Um, and then there's like music and games that I played when my mom passed away that mean a lot to me. And I don't know, it's just gaming was there for us, and I think a lot of collectors feel that way. It's an escape.
Yeah, I absolutely can relate to the like I looking around my room now at all the different pieces that I have and keep on display are all things that I associate directly with like specific points in my life, specific memories. It's very seldom do I get something or people. It's very seldom that I'll get something just because like oh it's cool and I like the thing. That's very rare. There usually is some sort of personal emotional relationship to the object, for lack of a better term.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, exactly. And but I will say there are a lot of times where I buy crap and I'm like, why did I buy this? Like, I bought a Steam Deck the day it got announced because I was like, oh, that's neat. The reality
right,
is I don't really play PC games that much, and it's probably just gonna rot. Uh, this is gonna hurt the chat if I don't know what's going on because I'm not there. But anybody that listens to this, they're gonna hate me for this statement. Like, I bought an analog pocket the minute I could, and
right.
it's here, and I've literally touched it once, and I've had it for like a month, and everybody's like still mad they can't get it. But that was another impulse buy thing, so it does happen, but it doesn't happen as frequently.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where like I did the same thing with the Steam Deck actually. Like as soon as it was announced, I was like, okay, order. And then I thought about it and it was like, well, I never leave my house. Like not even pandemic wise. Like I'm just a person who just stays at home all the time. Like I don't know why I need this and then ended up canceling the order.
Was that another cat?
Oh yeah, I got two here.
Oh, that's awesome. I have two cats.
Yeah.
And then in the room next to me are my two chinchillas. They're named Han Solo and Chewbacca, Han and Chewie.
Honestly, little chinchillas. Um Yeah, I collect cats, but I only have two so far. Um,
Legally, you're only allowed to have so many.
is it true? It must be. It must be true. You can't have
What?
infinity cats, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
well, in my state, North Carolina, I think there's a limit on pets in general. I think it's like three dogs and then, but then like maybe five pets max. I don't know. There's some weird rule.
there's got to be
Like all,
related to property size or something. Like,
I don't, maybe, I guess if you own
because
a
if you've got a
farm, you can
farm or something,
if you
right?
have a
Like,
farm or something, you can obviously have whatever the hell you want, but like I don't know, all my neighbors seem like they're pushing the limits because there's like too many dogs outside.
hey, uh, yeah. Let's see. What was I going to say? So, okay, we tried to get on it and we veered off it. So, what is the on your end? Once we send you, here's our game. Uh, here's the source code ish for here's the not it's not the source code, but the like the thing you can
So,
put
yeah,
on the
the build.
disc. Do you know what goes on, or do you send that off and it's done, or like what is the actual stampy process into getting it into a box?
I mean, it depends on the platform. So I mean, with both platforms, the physical version of the game, the build, so to speak, has to go through another round of FQA or lot check, depending on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means to the people that don't know is just the platform holders have to test to make sure that it works as a physical thing. So they like run the game on a console, they make sure it boots up properly, etc. Then once it goes from there, it goes into mass production. Uh, and that's after artwork has been submitted. You have to get through lots of approvals with that because you have to be legally compliant with what they have, and then you also have to be compliant with like what the ratings want. And then once that process is over, you get all the boxes and stuff, and it's basically done for you. some of the platforms might require more hands-on than other ones. Like you might
Mhm.
have to find a partner that does, the manual and then puts the manual in the case and then shrink wraps it. Some of them will do all of it for you. It just kind of depends on what their facilities are.
Right. And there's a technical reason why. I mean, there's obviously a collectory reason why there's limited runs, right? There's a fixed number in the batch. But can you speak anything to the production reasons why it's not as many copies as you want all the time?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of do a mix now. We do some things limited. With Sony, it's easier to do things limited because the audience, in all honesty, is the smallest at the moment. Well, Xbox, is probably the smallest period because that community has pushed Game Pass so hard that like
Right.
everybody just believes in digital now. I know that there are collectors out there because they ask me literally every day, when's your first Xbox release, which I really want to do, and it's coming. But from a sales perspective, it is the smallest of that physically. And then with like Sony, it kind of varies on the game. It varies on the is it PS4 or PS5, and then Switch. We almost always do open pre-order unless it's a game that somebody else made and asked us to sell. Sometimes they'll just give us a limited amount. And the biggest reasons for these policies is retail when we started. And it's happening again actually. Retail when we started it was a dying market in terms
Hmm.
of physical stuff. Like a lot of developers were digital only when we started, and it was because retail just wasn't feasible anymore. There was, the retailer takes a giant cut, the distributor takes a giant cut, and then if you're a developer, you have a publisher that takes a giant cut. And by the time you get your game done, you're making maybe a dollar or two per copy you sold, and that's at like, anywhere from a $30 to $60 price tag. It's just, and then that's assuming they sold. If they didn't sell, because retailers have the ability to charge you the money back for everything not sold. They have the ability to return it. They can clearance it and then ask you for the money that they lost clearancing it. It's a pretty ridiculous system, and we did limited stuff because we never wanted to be in a position where we were left with too much stock. There was a
Right.
Josh could speak to this better, but there was a DS or 3DS game where a guy self-published it, and when he sold it, it didn't sell, and now he literally has a garage full of this game that he can't get rid of.
It
This
was,
was like
I think I know
I
the
for,
game. It's I think that was been Jason Rohr's game, right?
Yeah, it was some game that I was like, oh, I probably wouldn't have bought it either because I don't. It's not my kind of game.
Diamond Trust of London,
Yeah, that
maybe.
might be it.
Um,
But
yeah.
yeah, that person, they're literally buried in their own stock, and the only thing they can do really is take a loss and give it away at this point. And we never wanted to be in that position because it hurts our partners. And we were developers originally, and our whole motto is like to be developer first, which is something customers get mad about. They're like, you're not customer centric, and it's like, no, we're developer centric. Like we're
Hmm.
trying to show developers that there's still a reason to do physical. Like we can't just make every game clearance for you because then it hurts the developer and they don't make games anymore. So that was the reason for the limited thing, and then we do a open pre-order for a set amount of time for the same reasons. We collect as much as we can, and then we just kind of go ahead and produce it, and then orders are cut off. But now that we've grown so much, we have a lot of people that work with us because they were at retail and they were like, hey, the retailers screwed me over. We'd like to do it with you only. Like you be the distributor, but we don't want our games to be limited. We want to pay for it and you just sell it and get a cut and we'll keep it open forever as long as there's demand. And we do that system too. But that only seems to work with bigger publishers because they are fronting the risk.
Right.
Whereas with everything we do, we pay for it. So that's another reason too. Like we are financially responsible for every copy we sell. And I don't want to be stuck with all these things that didn't sell because then I'll have a developer saying like, "Where's my check?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like
Right.
you convinced me to sell 30 million of your game instead of just the couple thousand I suggested. That would never happen. That's a huge number. But it's just an example. I've
Right.
had people before approach me and say like, "Hey, I have this game I want to sell, and it's going to sell 100,000," and I have to say, "I don't think we can work together because if you already think that's the number your game can sell, I can tell you right now the physical market isn't there anymore.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
unless you're a AAA game,
What so I mean, I went through the I went if we're going to be super real in this conversation. I went through a little bit of an ego check when we approached, it was, hey, we've got this, great game. We're ready to go. Like let's launch 1 billion units or whatever. But I didn't feel dejected or anything like that. I think you've developed a very good temperance and realistic approach to, it's a market reality. It's a market I don't know particularly well, but I mean, you must have all kinds of reactions to the reality of the situation, and so how do you personally manage development relationships when things don't go. Game developers, especially tour style game developers, are very used to getting things going their way. So I'm curious how you manage those relationships when you can't do what they want.
It depends. I mean, we usually build a good enough rapport right away where the ego stuff goes out the window because we just explain, hey, if the developer is like, I personally think we could sell 200,000, I'll say, "Hey, that's awesome. I'm glad that you think that bodes well for us. If you think that can sell that well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think we'll quite hit that because the market just sucks right now. It has nothing to do with your game. Obviously, we'll sell as many as we can, but like, don't please don't be mad if I can't quite reach that number because there's just no like it's just, I can't force people to buy a game
Right.
and the market just sucks. Like look at GameStop. Like they're pivoting to NFTs, which is my least favorite thing going on right now.
Right.
Um so we just explain that and usually that goes well. And it's rare that I get somebody that just like won't listen and they're like, "Oh, I can't believe you would sell yourself short." Because I mean, in reality, I am a very half empty guy. I like to under promise and over deliver. I
Right.
was
Right.
taught that in sales when I worked in sales. Um I always want to just kind of assume the worst, but try to deliver the best secretly. And that's what the way we work with a lot of our devs. There has been a dev. I'm not going to say their names at all, but
Fair. Don't.
a long time ago, I approached them about a game series they had, and I was like, "Hey, we really want to do this game you have. I think because we were young back then too, so I was like, I think we could sell probably anywhere from 5 to 10,000, which was a lot for us.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a really high number that I just pulled out of my butt. And they were like, "Oh, that's it. I think this game could sell anywhere from 100 to 300,000." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, even at that point, I knew that that number just is not feasible unless you're like a Call of Duty. And then I
Right.
was like, "Okay, well, I don't think this is gonna work." And then they ghosted me anyway. But then years later, they came back and they were like, "Hey, we want to work with you." And we did the game, and it sold about 20 to 30,000, but nowhere near the mark that they said it would. And I
Right.
was like, "This is just evidence of what I was trying to say." Like, you could have a large IP, and it still doesn't really mean anything if the audience doesn't want it.
When it comes to getting that volume of sales, how much of that do you think is on the game property itself? Like this is the game itself versus um, making a special release out of it. Like we tried to do the little things that we could. We've got some special reversible cover art in ours. There's other little things in there that people are haven't seen yet. And I'm curious, what makes a product that's going to sell more or less than the other, or is it just this is the game, this is where it's at, and that's what it goes for?
Yeah, I mean, so when we started, we just kind of had to assume what numbers we thought would work. As we've grown, we obviously have data to back that up. So let's say you pitch game A to me. I look up a lot of things. I look up game A's. How often is it brought up on social media? I look up how did it review? I look up the price it is. If it's a really expensive digital game, the chances are it's not going to sell a whole lot because that's a harder price for people to impulse buy. If
Mm-hmm.
it's too cheap, that's also another problem because it's too hard for people to justify spending more for the physical. I look at the game type. There's a lot of data we have on what game types do well. The visual novel crowd is kind of like one of those weird crowds where there's a huge niche of people that love those, like story type games
Right.
with tons of choices. And so those games can usually do really well, and I'm not really worried about the risk on that end. But there's other games where you're like, this is a really well done platformer that reviewed really well, but if nobody knows what it is, nobody will show up to buy it. And it just kind of depends from there. There's all that, and then the mistake we made once on a game, I can't name that game either, but this was like years ago, is we looked up the Steam data, like how well did this game sell digitally on Steam? And it sold like close to 1 million copies, and we're like, oh, there's no way this game doesn't do well. And we struggled to sell 3,000 copies of it.
Interesting. I mean,
So
without talking specifics about the game, like, is there a reason? Was it like high Steam sales off of discounts, or like A lot of keys
that
given
that
away,
that's
or what was the
that's
what was the skew?
that was part of the problem. Was those numbers don't reflect how often was that game given away, how often
Hmm.
was it in like one of those bundles where you get a ton of keys for nothing, how often was the game in its own sales, and then was the game just like a zeitgeist thing? Did we miss it? Was it like a long time ago and no one cares anymore and they've already played it and they're like, I don't need to go back to this game ever again? And then is it only just the PC audience? Do console people care? Because the PC audience is, nowadays there are no physicals.
Right.
Like we still do it just because it's fun, but and the reality is a lot of people can't use the stuff we make because it doesn't have a disk drive.
Right.
And those people don't care. And then if they're part of the, as they like to say, the PC master race, they're not going to go to consoles. They don't give a shit. They spend all their money on their really nice PC. They don't want to own a console version, and those kind of things you have to take into account.
Um, but so when let's say we've gone through the data evaluation, we'll call it the number crunching, and say, okay, we think this game is going to sell, whatever. We'll pick a number 30,000. Is that a 20,000 number? Um, do you think that doing more in a physical edition, delivering more than just game on disc in box, is directly, do you have data to back up that it improves sales with fans, um or is it just the game itself?
I don't I don't know at this point if internally someone would disagree with me, but I feel like at this point, if the physical stuff, if let's say your game digitally is, $10 or $15, and then physically it's, 25 or 30, it's not that big of an upcharge. I don't think anything inside the physical thing matters to fans because they didn't need that extra, value added. Um,
Right.
and it really depends on the niche too, like, or the market, like, or like those fans in particular, like, are they familiar with this developer? Are they going to care that maybe there's an instruction manual that's also behind the scenes or like has a concept art that's never been seen before? Like, do they care enough? I would say more oftentimes than not it doesn't really matter, but as a collector, when I was a kid, my favorite thing in the world was I bought a new game. I'm sitting in the car. I'm reading the
Yeah.
instruction manual. I'm reading the back of the box. I'm digesting literally everything I can about this game. And I still like to do that. I think for the true fans of that game and that audience, it goes a long ways in terms of like how much they appreciate you. But I think they would have technically bought the game regardless, but they would have thought you were lazy or cheap for not doing it. So I think if you can do it, you should. But the
Right.
reality is, it might not have technically been worth your time. It depends on how you value your time.
Oh, I don't value my time at all.
Really,
I'm an indie game dev.
yeah. we're
uh
we're talking at night. You could be doing anything
I could
else.
be doing literally anything else.
Be
The
petting those cats.
Yeah. The Okay, but you do some very nice deluxe collector's editions. Um
Yeah, I do think depending on the game, those are worth it. If you make for a very indie game a really nice collector's edition and the audience isn't there or like it's too new. Like this is a thing I harp on all the time. When I see a brand new IP announced by a new studio and it's like a weird IP and you're like, I don't know if this is going to work and establish this as a long-lasting IP, and they do a $400 collector's edition, that's a huge mistake. You're just asking to lose money on a thing that nobody knows about and assuming that people are buying into the hype when like no one knows what it is. Like, why are you selling this? Obviously, it depends on the studio too. Like, if the Dark Souls people decide to develop any game, the audience is there.
right.
But if this was their very first game, like if they had done Demon Souls and did an insanely expensive collector's edition, I don't think it would have sold at the time. I think it would sell now and it would be worth a lot, but I think they would have lost all the money on the first wave.
Right.
So it really just depends on the game. Like Castlevania is an easy automatic yes because it's a long-lasting series. People know what it is. People want merch for it. That's the other thing is like, is this an indie game that people are asking for merch? Like you have to kind of like that's another evaluating thing. I think
Hmm.
there's a good middle ground, which is something we're trying to develop internally. It's just like a slightly more expensive standard edition. We call it it's just a deluxe edition, and it maybe includes like a soundtrack. People do love collecting soundtracks, regardless if they know the game that well. And they, like I said, they love print stuff. Like they love behind the scenes stuff. developer diaries. They love, art books. It just there's a lot you can do, even if you're like a smaller indie. That I think goes a long ways. You just have to make sure you don't. It's again like how much is your time worth, and how much are you willing to lose if
Right.
you do the most insane thing.
Right. And when I mean, I've seen some products that you guys have put out that are the most insane thing. What is the manufacturing process on getting all these unique pieces that go into the box, like statues and keychains and pins and you know, all kind of mouse pads or whatever? Like, how do you source distributor or vendors, and how do you organize that process?
Yeah, when we first started getting into collector's edition stuff, we found a nearby printing facilities that do a lot of the trading cards for like, the this region or the whole country. And we were like, hey, can you do these things? And they were like, sure. So and then eventually we're like, hey, why don't we just poach one of these people too, so that we have a list of all the vendors that that place used. And you kind of just build that whole thing with us comes from our producers. Their responsibility is kind of sourcing all these products. They get test products. Like sometimes we'll pitch something to multiple places and they'll send in a prototype and we'll pick the best factory. The problem nowadays is just like there are no materials for anything and there's no
Right.
shipping containers and it's like the worst nightmare ever. So like, I uh I appreciate any of our customers that are watching this that have pre-orders with us that have taken forever to ship, and I know that there's no place in the world where we're happy with that, and
Right.
it's just that's the state of things. Like there's just like vinyl, like there's literally a shortage of vinyl, and also I think there's a shortage because apparently Taylor Swift made a million vinyl, and I think she's responsible for killing the vinyl like revival of we finally get out of the pandemic a little and the vinyl's back, and then she's like, give me all of it. And it's like, damn. So, uh, that being said, I hope she didn't hear that and I don't get attacked by Swift fans. But, you know, if you're going to open your Swift vinyl and listen to it, then okay. If you're not, then damn you because you stole vinyl from me.
I hate to break it to you, but Taylor Swift is a regular viewer of this show. You're probably going to be put on blast any minute now.
You got cats. She probably appreciates it.
Yeah. The so okay. So sourcing multiple vendors. Right? Now, how do you go about deciding what to actually make for each special edition? Because that's a really fun creative process. Like, okay, what goes well with this game, and what can we do, and finding the middle ground there.
So that process is tuned to one to two ways. So if it's owned by a major company, like let's say your Konami's, your Disney, your Star Wars, we will design what we wish, what like as a fan, what would I like to see? And then we go through the approval process there and we find out like what stuff has already been licensed out to other people. Like for Star Wars example, I would have loved to make action figures, but Hasbro has the rights to that. The only way I'm gonna be able to do that is do it through Hasbro.
Right.
And Hasbro is gonna be like, "Who the hell are you? Like you're limited. How many copies are you gonna do? That's nothing." So that's the process with the bigger IPs for like developers that are not mega companies and stuff. The what we like to do is if I don't already have ideas myself, I'll say, hey, what is your dream wish? Like of all the things you could do, like what are some things you would like to do? And as a company, we'll figure out what the pricing would be for all the things you want to do, and we'll tell you what we think is feasible. And you could argue why you think we should do something else, and we'll try to cater as best we can to you.
Right. Um, and what are some of your personal like favorite things to produce when it comes to making game collectibles?
Apparently, I'm in the like minority of people nowadays. I still like statues. Um,
What about
I
them?
will say after finally buying my first Prime One statue, I kind of regret getting into those because those are literally like 3 or 4 feet tall. And I sure as hell did not measure centimeters correctly when I converted it to inches. So I like statues, but space is an issue. The other thing I do love is like art books.
Mm-hmm.
I love behind the scenes stuff. I love art books. And I love vinyl. I think vinyl is one of my favorite things too. I tried so hard to resist getting into vinyl, and then one day Josh kept getting more in for games that I liked, and I was like, damn. So I started buying those.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's about it for me. I would say the fans that we've noticed, like what they definitely love the CD soundtrack, and you got to try to get as much of the music as you can, if not all of it.
Right.
Unfortunately, if it's like a Japanese game, that's a lot harder than they realize. because there's like how licensing works in Japan is entirely different than how it works out west. Um, they love the art books just like I do. I would say the majority of people though don't really care for statues. Like Josh doesn't really like statues because it's a space thing and he has to figure out where to put it. If it's a book, it's easier to put on a shelf. If it's a statue, it's like, does he like it enough to care? Like, I don't know. What do you like?
I also like vinyls. However, I'm curious. Do you open your vinyls and do you play them?
Yes, I have a significant amount not open, and it's not by choice. It's just that I haven't gotten to them.
Right. I have never opened any of my vinyls
Oh
ever.
wow.
I don't have even have a player. It's just like I don't know. There's something I love the frame of the art, and when I like I've thought about this a lot, and it's one of those things where yes, I could just print out a picture of the album artwork and put it on the wall and like consider and like it'd be functionally the same thing, but there's a difference between knowing the music is in there somewhere that it changes the way it resonates when I look at it. And so even though I never open this stuff, I still feel like it's different than if I just had the picture of it.
I will say, I was the same way at first, and then eventually I got a really nice record player, and
Mm-hmm.
there's something about putting a record on and just kind of sitting on like a nice chair or couch and just listening to music and just zoning out. That's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Like I know you could do the same with your
Right.
computer and stuff, but for some reason the act of putting that vinyl on and just kind of like looking at the vinyl while you're listening, it just I'm assuming that's probably how my dad felt when he was a kid. Like
Yeah, it's also there's I think this is I mean and now we're veering wildly off the collectibles target here, but the act of listening to an album is like I think a sort of like dying thing. I really love finding an album I can listen to front to back, and I think a vinyl or physical media of any sort is kind of designed for that. It's how it was made. It's really hard to find the track you're looking for when you're digging
yeah,
with a needle, right?
if there's a song I'm not sure about on Spotify, I just skip it. Whereas a vinyl, I might actually appreciate the song more because I gave it a chance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
there's something so full confession time. I was a very heavy pirate for a good portion of my gaming career. Not my career, but my life, my game playing life. And I noticed this thing happening where I would devalue the experiences that I was having. I didn't really care enough as much because it's like, oh, this one sucks. I'll just go download something else. Oh, blah 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 blah. And when I finally started, I made the conscious decision to be like, you know what? I should be paying for things. I'm going to start investing my money in these experiences. I got more out of them. I appreciated them more. There was more of me invested in the experience, and I'm curious if you see that happening with people who collect games. Do they like physical games because the investment is even higher, right? Like they do you think it's true that people get more out of something that they invest more into?
I mean, I would assume so because it's the same way with me. I was a pirate back in the day too, especially with music and stuff. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Kazaa, LimeWire, all that crap.
The good old days.
And then movies especially. In fact, the sad story about the movie thing is I was doing it up until like Zootopia came out. But that was a day I literally at the same time downloaded Zootopia and Zoolander 2. And I got a letter in the mail that was like, oh, you're in big trouble for downloading Zoo. That was all I could see at first. I was like, oh shit, Disney found out I downloaded Zootopia. But it was for Zoolander. They were so mad that no one's paying to see it that they sent me a letter yelling at me for illegally downloading it. And then I was like, oh my god, I'm getting in trouble for Zoolander of all things. So then I went back to just buying everything. And I've noticed this one, like, I've been in the game industry for a while. I've worked with, lots of people at this point, and I'll get free games all the time, like
Mm-hmm.
even disc ones, like Sony. Like maybe I know someone at Sony or I know the developer that did a game for on PlayStation. They're like, hey, here's a free game. It's like the gesture means a lot, but for some reason in my head, the game I have a harder time wanting to play it or stick with it because it was free. I didn't invest my own money into it, so I don't feel as obligated to like really give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of times now where like a lot of people at work will be like, "Hey, a game just came in for you from like Amazon, and they're like, oh, why wouldn't you have just asked the developer for this game? And it's like, because one, I want to support them, because now I know like how much that affects them, and then two, I want to actually enjoy it. I don't want to feel like it was a freebie, because if it's a freebie, I probably will never play it.
Right.
Um, and I've heard from other collectors too, it's the same way. They just, the ownership goes, it helps them feel more invested, like you're saying. And it was like that with music. Like you're exactly saying the correct thing. Like I would literally download gigabytes of stuff that I would probably never actually listen to or appreciate, and it was only until I started buying those albums that I really cared.
It's it's interesting to hear you say that, because I mean, I assume you get like rapid fire shotgun, here's Steam keys all day, please look at my game, you know.
Yeah, the Steam key thing is a little different. So the Steam key thing, like if I'm sent like a PC build, I in my mind, even if it's technically finished, I pretend it's not because it's not technically the console version that we would put out.
Right.
And that can be extremely different. Like there's a lot of like strategy games I love on PC and I go to play it on console and it's like holy shit they couldn't figure out the UI and it's miserable, or vice versa. Like maybe the PC version's awful because it was meant to be a console game. So I don't have that problem as bad with people sending me free PC builds, but when they send me free keys for consoles, uh, versus me just buying their game like it's a not limited run game, it like it's nice to have because I don't have to be lazy about it, but like I still have to buy the game myself in order to like want to experience it. Like I did that with I think there were some Sega games. I used to have a friend that gave me like a Yakuza game for free, and like I never finished the Yakuza game for the longest time until it was finally like, on sale physically, and I was like, I'll just buy it, and then I played it.
Right. It's a weird bit of like, so do you would you advise then that indie game devs give out fewer keys, because that's the thing, like that's the thing we do, like a lot of people just give out, like I've always given out my game like crazy, like early on I gave out a lot of copies of my game, and I do kind of contribute it to us gaining notoriety, gaining success in sales eventually. um but it I think that I know a lot of people who have had my game for a long time, and then you know eventually they come into my Twitch stream and they're like, "Oh, you made that game? I have that game. I've had it for 6 years and I've never played it." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." Like, would you get in a humble bundle, or you know
Yeah,
what?
I would advise PC people that it's a lot different for them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you haven't built your company up to be like double A or triple A status. I think as an indie, you almost have to rely on social media and word of mouth at this point, and like Twitch streamers and all that. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with giving your game out to the correct people and giving out as many as you can to the people that you know will help boost your game. As a console person, I mean, yeah, I hate to use this as an example because people are going to be like, "Wow, they shouldn't do that." But like Nintendo almost never discounts their
Right.
games, and
I
people
know.
still buy them, and it's because they know that it's the only way they can get them.
I've been waiting four
Um,
years for Mario Kart to dip. Just $10 and
yeah,
I'll buy it, please.
yeah. You might find that at Target one day on like a Black Friday deal, but
Right.
it's rare that Nintendo ever touches the prices, and I think that's smart. Josh and I a long time ago when we were first pitching limited run to developers, one of the big things we pointed out was there was a PS4 launch game that came out called Stick It to the Man, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a really good game. Like I got it, it was like a launch game, so I bought it digitally, but I didn't know there was a physical version until like a year later. And the only way I found that out was when Toys R Us was finally starting to shut down. I was checking all their clearance stuff, and they literally had an entire like if you ever been to Walmart or one of those places, they'll have those
Been.
giant bins full of like discounted movies or games
Yeah.
nowadays. Like Best Buy does it, and that whole bin was Stick It to the Man, and that game reviewed really well. But I knew so many people that never played it because they thought it was a bad game because it was in a clearance bin. I also like there's a stigma about being the cheap
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
People think you're not a good game if you're cheap, and it's really shitty. Like that's just how it is, though. That's another reason why collecting is such a thing. There's so many games that are worth tons of money and are garbage, but people think they're the best games ever made because they're like, why are they worth this much? And
Right.
it really that goes a long way, and it's weird.
It's worth this much because it's super rare, because nobody bought it because it's bad, right? Like that. There are cases of this. Um, I guess looking forward with the hopefully the vinyl shortage coming to the end. Has this period of supply shortage changed anything about the way you guys are operating, or like how you're going to continue operating in the future?
Yeah, we're a lot better about pre-rolling as much as possible. Like a lot of the vinyl we do nowadays, especially when the pandemic started, and we were being told by our partners that like, hey, we can't source vinyl. Like the wait times are now from 3 months to almost a year, and sometimes more. We are in the background. Like let's say I signed a game, that game might not come out for another year because if I sign the music rights with it, I've probably been trying to get that vinyl ready.
Right.
Um, and it's also affected the way we do certain sales. Like with the vinyl, especially, like I can't do open pre-orders anymore because if I do an open pre-order and then I send it to the person to produce, it's going to take me a year to get those. I have to limit it. I have to just guess what I think is going to sell and pray to God that there's enough people to get it. And then usually, most times with us, especially game wise, that number is never enough. Then we get yelled at, and it's unfortunate. We do that with a lot of the collector's edition stuff too. And we've been doing it with Switch too, because Switch does have a longer lead time than PlayStation. So
Hmm.
we try to like pre-roll as much as that and kind of assume what the first batch of games should be. Um, and then finish out the remaining amount once we have the data. But it to answer your question shortly, yes, there's a lot of pre-production that goes into stuff now than it used to be.
Right on. And I guess continuing to look forward, is there anything elsewhere in the game space that you think people, as we get near to the end of our time here, anything elsewhere in the game space that you think people should be keeping their eye on, or interesting things you want to like point out?
Yeah, there's this new thing coming out called the Ouya, and I think no, and there's this other thing I heard about recently called an Engage. I think those are going to be huge.
Huge.
No, I think PSVR 2 is something that's really exciting. VR
Hmm.
did really well for us. It's a very niche audience, and I think with the way Sony's trying to make it is, it's a one wire system finally, because I think it was a nightmare to set up. And I think that's going to go really well. Everyone I know almost has an Oculus too, so I think VR is finally starting to become affordable.
Yeah.
It's not being gatekeeped anymore by those insane prices and PCs requirements. And then you got your stupid stuff too coming along with that, like the metaverse crap and all that. So your John and Jane are going to be playing VR, which is going to be wild.
Yeah.
But there's going to be an audience looking for the more hardcore game stuff, and I think that's going to be big. I think the consoles, they're still doing really well. I think I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. I don't think physical media is going anywhere. I think we got at least another couple generations with each platform. I think Nintendo will probably be the final platform. Um, and then handheld retro stuff is like the analog's doing great work.
Right.
Like the Pocket's amazing. I might not play it a lot, but it looked great. And I think retro gaming is finally getting to a point where it's no longer the same thing, where it's not gatekeeped. Like to play retro games the best way possible, it used to be ridiculously expensive because nobody has a CRT just laying around anymore. And if you want to play it correctly on your TV, you had to have a frame meister and all this other crap. And now you don't have to do that. There's like consoles that they've built that they do everything just fine. So I think we're going to see a huge resurgence in like classic gaming, which we're already seeing. I don't know. I think we're in a good state for gaming, other than the weird metaverse and NFT crap. But that's just me.
Right. Um, I usually ask indie devs this, but I mean, what's you're in Raleigh, North Carolina. Other than Epic, being a giant footprint there, what's the gaming scene like out there? Are you still there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of my first game industry jobs is Ubisoft. They're out here too.
Uh,
Um,
uh, uh, Red
Red Storm.
Storm, yes. I've,
Yeah,
I've,
Red
I've,
Storm's out here. We've also got
they have a crazy gun rack.
yeah, an Insomniac branch is out here. What else? I think Apple's moving out here. I think
Interesting.
I heard right. Like, I think they bought a whole bunch of land already, so this area is about to get expensive. So I need to buy another house soon. And then what
Is it
else do we got?
so?
Oh, Amanji, the people that make Temple Run are out here.
Right? So
Um,
is it all just huge players out there, or are there is there an indie scene in Raleigh, or is it
it's an indie scene. I think it's growing too because this is a very big gaming area. There's a lot of people that leave these places and start their own things. Um, it's definitely not an area when I was growing up that I ever thought would be huge because I'm originally from Atlanta and I thought Raleigh
Mhm.
was the lamest place in the world. But now I can't leave because literally the entire game industry moved to like this area, it feels like.
Right?
And then like the whole movie industry moved to Atlanta. So it's like really weird that I've been in both areas.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess that's interesting. I mean, I think I haven't been back to Raleigh in 5 years at least, 6 years, but probably more now. But it was like at the time, Epic was the only really big thing, and then and Red Storm. But it's interesting to hear that you're getting a lot more big guys flooding in. But
Yeah, Epic bought my childhood mall across from my school. That's weird. Uh, they've always just kind of been up the street from the high school anyway, but it's weird that they bought the dead mall. We did a pop-up shop in that mall, and that was the most action that mall had seen in over a decade. Um, they even told me that literally word for word. Uh, but yeah, it's a crazy area now. It's the Research Triangle Park is what they call it. The like Chapel Hill, Durham, and Raleigh represent like this huge growth in technology, and
interesting.
there's a lot of just big technology people out here too. It's kind of insane. That's like what I was saying. Like I don't know if I could ever leave now because this is where my job's taking me and where everything's happening.
It's a lot of gravity.
Yeah.
Um, right on. Well, it was a pleasure having you on. I really appreciate this deep dive into all things physical. Thank you for helping us make our physical edition.
Yeah.
I,
Maybe at some point we'll regroup and maybe we'll do a different platform.
we'll talk. We'll talk. But thanks everybody, and we'll see you later. I don't know where I'm going to send you, but goodbye for now.